Utah has now lost 3 games in a row to BYU, and the blame game starts with the head man himself, Kyle Whittingham.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time tuning into the show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can download the app today. My name is JT Wistrcill, excited to be joined by one of the co-hosts of Bryce and Bianucci every single weekday morning in the state of Utah. Bryce Larson, friend of the show, coming on. And Bryce, it was a long night. It was tough to even just jump back. I'll be like, I got to talk about this loss again. It's just still such a painful one to talk about. But obviously, when you look back on last night, as we have to do, and now it is 3 straight losses to BYU, you go, okay, what went wrong last night? When you outgain BYU by 100 yards, when you do have so much momentum at different points in the game, getting into the red zone so frequently, and you come up so empty, what went wrong? And I really believe, Bryce, this loss, the number one person that you pin it on is Kyle Whittingham and the decisions that he made to go for it on 4th down. I could talk about why I disagree with them so vehemently in a moment, but I really believe when you say whose fault is it, it's first and foremost the Utah football head coaches.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you there, JT. I do think that this one comes down to coaching. I think Utah just got out-coached at the end. Kalani, towards the end, didn't make a great decision himself, which could have really hurt BYU. Should that onside kick have gone their way. But I would agree with you across the board. Witt is to blame along with the coaching staff. A lot of decisions in that game that could have went either way, probably should have made a different decision on there. And it's easy for us to look back on it and say that, but in that moment, it was important for Utah. And they went to the analytics game, right? They talked about the analytics game and how the analytics said to go for it in those situations. And that's what they're leaning on right now. And we can break that down. We can go into in depth on that. But at the end of the day, those decisions are what cost that. I think there was a couple of plays and here's the other thing. It's more so not playing the Utah brand of football. I think they talked about it on the broadcast too. RG3 and Jason Benetti continually talked about it, how they are not doing what Utah normally does. Because the two coaching staffs know each other so much, they just don't want to go out there and be vanilla. But I think that shows that Utah just couldn't play their brand of football and win that game. And they weren't confident in doing that. What did we see Utah do for a long time against BYU? Slam the ball, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Instead, they're throwing it to Semi Taulanga 4 different times. Like, I love
Semi slander on this podcast, Bryce.
I love Semi, and I love what he does, but you get what I'm getting at here.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what you do well. What did you just do against Arizona State the week before? One of the better rushing defenses in the conference. Yes, BYU has a great defense, but you abandoned the run so early, and there's so many things that just went wrong for Utah. I thought it comes down to coaching across all sides.
It absolutely does. We'll talk about the ref aspect of how much blame is there. But even before, if you were to even get to the refs, there are so many other things that Utah did to lose themselves this game before we can dive into any sort of questionable calls. But let's dive a little bit more back into just exactly what happened with Kyle Whittingham last night. His decision to go for it on 4th and 3, and 4th and 7 was the first one. You're down 7-0. You get a field goal. I don't understand how in the world he said his analytics said go for it on both the 4th and 3 and the 4th and 7. The 4th and 7, it was, you're still right there. You're down 7-0. And then the 4th and 3, it's 10-7. You would have tied the game had you kicked the field goal. And I understand Curtis missed it, but Witt said the reason they trotted the offense back out there was the analytics said to go for it. The cojones on Kyle Whittingham to say, the analytics just said to go for it. First of all, you never would have said that even 5 years ago. So I don't know why all of a sudden you're just like hiding behind that in a way. How in the world does the analytics of the Utah passing offense, because on 4th and 7, you have to pass the ball. How in the world do those analytics tell you to go for it? That makes zero sense to me with how poor your passing attack was last night. And even on the 4th and 3 one, Bryce, the analytics say on 4th and 3 to run the ball. You don't see see a lot of 4th and 3 runs work out for the most part too. So I just vehemently disagree with that. I really think Kyle Whittingham, if it is against any other team in the conference, Bryce, and any other team in the country, Kyle Whittingham kicks both of those field goals, but it's BYU. And he let his emotions get in the way and how badly he wanted to beat BYU. He didn't want to go out settling. And guess what, Kyle? You didn't settle, but you ended up with a big fat L, in part because of your, in some ways, selfish decisions to try to score touchdowns instead of doing what you should have been doing and kicking those field goals. I think hiding behind analytics was an absolute joke by him after the game.
At one point in the post-game press conference, he said that their red zone efficiency throughout the year was somewhere, 80 or 90%, which is incredible for an offense to be able to do that. But you look back at who they played. You scored 10 points against the best defense in the conference in Texas Tech's defense. Okay, you probably got into the red zone once or twice. And if you were 100% in the red zone against Texas Tech, congratulations, but that's only trips into the red zone. The rest of the season, who were you 90% against in the red zone? Defenses like UCLA.
Hey, it's a good UCLA team now. Come on.
Yeah, okay. UCLA with their former head coach coaching that didn't know what he was doing there. Arizona State. Who are you? Like, there's some context with these numbers. Now you factor in, okay, the freshman kicker, Curtis, he had missed one earlier in just a not necessarily missed it, but a practice snap and it wasn't even close. So I understand, okay, you get worried about that because he struggled a little bit throughout the year here. You factor that in. All of that still tells me that when you are playing such a good defense like BYU's defense, one of the top 3 defenses in the conference, points are at a premium in this football game. You have to take them when you can get them. Go with the gut feeling. I don't care what the analytics say, and if you skewed it towards the kicker not being very good or not, I also don't understand how the analytics said to go for it both of those 2 times. Doesn't make any sense to me at all.
No, and the lack of accountability as well. I really appreciated Kenny Dillingham after last week's game against Utah said, we got outcoached. I got outcoached. I didn't hear anything close to that come out of Kyle Whittingham's mouth last night. And I literally don't think Kyle Whittingham is capable of admitting he got outcoached against BYU. Like, just how graceful Kalani Sitake was in his post game and talking about their relationship, everything. And then you go over to Kyle and he's all bitter and he's like, well, why would we change the analytics and all? It's rigid. And it's the stuff like that, the responses like that, the performance like that against a good team. Utah's now lost to the 2 best teams they've played on the season, I think is why you see people getting the fire Kyle Whittingham chance going and up again. And to me, even though I'm very frustrated with him right now, and especially I'm frustrated with him in this BYU game, he's got like a Ryan Day Michigan thing going on right now with BYU, where it's like he wants to beat them his way. Last year, Ohio State wanted to outmuscle Michigan, and they just could not do that with the 2 defensive tackles that Michigan had at the time, and it lost them the game. And some of Witt's decisions last night absolutely helped lose Utah the game. But I still am not on the, hey, let's fire Kyle Whittingham train. Like, let's not forget, this was a ranked matchup. We just hammered ASU. We beat a UCLA team that, yes, was bad at the time, but it looks better now, right? You still should probably go something like 8-4, even like, I just feel like 8-4 should be in some ways the floor, maybe 7-5, but it should be more closer to an 8-4 for this season too. And you have lost to what is now a top 10 team at BYU, and what I believe will once again become a top 10 team in Texas Tech. So I'm still not on the fire Whittingham train, but I can understand the frustration, especially with how he conducted himself in the press conference.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I thought overall, my overarching thought on all of this is that they got away from playing Utah football.
Yep.
Because they wanted to beat BYU so bad, and they felt like Kalani knew what they were going to bring and knew them so well that they did things that there was no reason to do. You play Utah football. Where's BYU the weakest? On the outsides. Where did Bray kill them the worst? On the outsides.
No.
You keep running into the outsides. You keep sticking with the run game, and you don't go away from it as soon as they did. It was still a 1-2 score game late. There was no reason to abandon that type of game plan, and they did. They went away from the Utah football identity, and I think that partially when Lander Barton got tossed out of the game, that game completely changed altogether. So
it did. There's so many other reasons the Utah lost this game, including the refs. We're going to talk about it in one moment. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if yours wins. That's right. Pick up a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because it gives you so many different ways to play. You can build parlays, player props, and even follow the live lines during the games. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. There's a great NFL slate coming up and college football around the corner. Utah is going to be a big favorite against a struggling Colorado team, and I feel good about Utah bouncing back. But however you're feeling, make sure you head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Quo. Quo, formerly OpenPhone, one of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners is Quo. Formerly OpenPhone, it's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When your customer conversations count, you are a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communication. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on landlines. Their built-in AI agent is a game changer. It can answer after-hours calls, capture leads, and even keep businesses moving when you're off the clock. Whether you're a solo operator juggling everything or part of a larger team, Quo makes it easy to stay responsive and professional. See why over 90,000, that's right, 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege, all caps, no spaces. And if you've got an existing number with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. We'll get to the refs in a moment because I do believe they deserve some of the blame for what was a bad performance last night. But I am also not going to come on here, nor do I really ever, and say, oh, you start with bad calls. You start with the litany of other things the reasons that Utah lost this game. We already pinned it #1. Kyle Whittingham's just blindness in some ways in order to see the bigger picture. His narrow-minded focused on, I need a touchdown. I don't care. Like 4th and 7, we're going to get it. Grit, we'll go for it. Like all of that is part of the reason that Utah lost. Outside of that, the next couple of reasons. How about the passing game being absolutely abysmal? I literally think we'll dive into that probably more on another show. That's on Jason Beck. It's on Dampier, and it's on the pass catchers. All of them to me. The bad tackling was brutal too. How about the self-inflicted mistakes as well? You're talking about things like late in the game. You're talking about a 12 men on the field penalty. Are you kidding me? In that big and that key of a spot too. You got some false start penalties that really hurt you as well, and some pass interference penalties where it's like, what are you guys doing out there? And there's just a lot of reasons that you can list of why Utah lost this game, Bryce.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And look, I don't know which one was the most egregious. I just know that the fact that Witt had to go to the referee and tell him at the beginning of the second half and be like, that's 6 penalties that you've called against us to 0. Mm-hmm. And they caught him on the broadcast yelling at the referee, reading his lips, saying that's 0 that you've called on BYU. I think that kind of put it in their minds. A lot of times I call basketball games, and a lot of times when coaches get teed up, you start to see the foul count start to shift towards that team with the coach that got teed up. It changes the game. And I think that's what Witt was trying to do a little bit there. And you started to see a lot more pass interference calls and other things called against BYU late in the game. But yeah, I would agree. It was kind of a strange situation. I also believe, though, JT, that goes back to coaching. I think that the fact that Utah had so many penalties on them, that's another aspect of coaching this football team. You have to know going into the game that BYU and their wide receivers are 15th in the nation at drawing pass interference and holding calls down the field. That's because they have athletes on the outside and they play that style of game. You have to coach them up better on the back end of the defense to not have those penalties happen. And I think this goes back to coaching. It's the same story, JT.
I agree. It's things like, let's send both linebackers on a blitz on Bear because we want to frustrate him to make a decision on 3rd and 10 late in the game. And Bear's like, oh, I'm going to run. And then you literally leave. Unfortunately, this is just true. Teo Johnson, who's your worst tackling player on this football team right now. He just is. I'm sorry. He had 2 brutal missed tackles in this game for Utah outside of, and there was a couple other ones too, but you send both the linebackers on a blitz there, and that puts you in a really tough spot. I do believe, though, like I said, when we're assigning blame, if you want to say, hey, the refs were bad, I think that's fair because, my gosh, Bryce, the amount of times that John Henry Daly was held in this game, I thought was absolutely out of control. And even on things like when Lander ended up hitting Bear on that one, you see they're all over him there. I thought there could have been way more holding calls there. I thought BYU got away with some stuff after the whistle. And I understand the Cougars are going to go, hey, well, guys got away with a thing or two as well. That's fair. But I do feel like it was 12-7. And I do totally agree with what you mentioned in terms of like Utah had this is where self-inflicted mistakes. Utah was being not as well coached, like they were committing dumber penalties. Utah should have had more penalties than BYU in this game. But I do believe there were absolutely some bad missed calls in this game that really hurt Utah. And if I'm Kyle Whittingham and I am Utah, I want to send some of those into the Big 12 and be like, hey, what's the reasoning explanation on some of this stuff? Because it was such a slant. I want to know why there weren't at least a few more holding calls or non-holding calls in a couple of instances on some of the BYU offensive linemen and DBs.
Sure, and that's all fair. I just think back to the Jackson Benny interception, and you look once again, and I believe it was Teo Johnson that had the holding on Carson Ryan, and that's such a huge penalty. You just can't have it. There's no reason you should even be holding Carson Ryan in that situation. It's not like he had massive separation or he was going to be able to get even further away from you. Just don't hold him. And that's another thing that comes down to coaching. And that's such a big interception when BYU's driving down the field in that time that would have changed the entire momentum, but it got taken away and wiped off the board.
It was massive, and the tackling issues with this team are maddening. Credit BYU for sticking to the run game, LJ Martin, all of that. But things there, and there were multiple guys that missed tackles, right? Defensive linemen, linebackers, everything. But we're not trying to pick on the guy, but Teo Johnson, like if he comes up with that sack and Lander Barton can remain in the game, it's everything. Because then, Bryce, I go back once again to that 3rd down, 3rd and 10, Bear takes off and runs. That's Teo again, who misses that call. And it was one. And Demooney missed a couple of big tackles in this game too, coming in, because it's hard to play when you haven't been on the field as much. Sometimes fresh legs help, but the other time, like you're not in the flow, the rhythm of it. And a lot of things are happening. So it was just the tackling issues. It's really unfortunate to see a Morgan Scally team struggling with tackling as much as this Utah team is.
Well, and the other thing that I want to bring up is that Lander Barton call is so big because on the broadcast, they pointed this out. BYU was attacking the middle. They were running between the tackles every single time. And they showed the yardage difference on the outsides, like 6 yards to the left and like 14 yards to the right. And it was all up the middle. The majority, like 80-90% of the yardage on the ground was all up the middle, whether they give it to LJ Martin or run it with Bear Bachmeier. And you lose your man in the middle, and it changes the entire rest of the game. So it was such a big call and such a big portion of that game. I just thought that's what you look back at and you think, if you could just do something a little bit better, play more disciplined football. And is that something we've ever heard about saying about a Kyle Whittingham coach team? Never. I think they played outside of their minds because they wanted to be BYU so bad. I think that's what it was. You're right on with that, JT.
To outgain them by 100 yards and lose this game and have more first downs and so many things is so disappointing when you look back on how it all turned about, how we got to the results that we did too. And also just say this is the type of game that in some ways you lost this game because of other things, but in some ways you also lost this game in the offseason because you lost some key defensive tackles to the transfer portal and you didn't replace them. And you have guys like Jonah Lae out there, and I really like him as a pass rusher, and at times he could do some nice things. Bryce, he got tossed off the ball a couple of times by BYU's offensive line. I'm talking like he's pushed 5 yards down the field, and that's part of the reason that teams have so much success, at least last night, and we've seen it a couple of times, running in between the tackles on Utah right now, is the hulking defensive tackles are not there like they used to be with this team. Utah should have added more in the offseason, and we see in a game like this, their decision not to, because of how thin they are in that room, really hurt them yesterday.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You lose a big guy in the middle, and then you don't go out and find anybody to replace him that can step up and meet the challenge. And I thought even on our show, I talked about it all weekend or all week long there on ESPN, The Fan, running it right up the middle because that's a little bit more of a soft spot on that Utah defensive line, and it showed big time against BYU last night.
It did. It's incredibly frustrating. All of these things are so frustrating because they also don't just lead to third straight loss to BYU. They lose to your second Big 12 loss when you still have several games coming up, of course, against Big 12 teams. Is Utah out of the Big 12 title race? Maybe. We're going to talk about it. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Monarch Money. Let's be honest, most of us can't name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal financial tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. It's helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get better a handle on my investments too without having to touch a spreadsheet. I love that I can review everything with my partner, see our shared goals, and make better financial decisions together. Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where my money's going and how to make it work harder for me too. Don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no space, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for half off your first year with Monarch Money. I can't wait for the press conference tomorrow to see what Kyle Whittingham's, if he's just going to continue to double down on his analytics. And it's mind-boggling to me. But Bryce, either way, Utah's now lost 2 games. If Utah is not out of the Big 12 title race, right? Like, they've lost 2 games in conference before. They made a Pac-12 title game and they won a Pac-12 title game at one point. But I do, as we sit here today, I don't think Utah's in the Big 12 title game. I don't think you can lose those 2 games. And I just see this team, and even though I look at BYU, I think they're going to stumble eventually. The way they're winning these games, some of the things that are happening, I don't go, oh, Tech BYU will never lose a Big 12 game the rest of the season. So there will be opportunities where they stumble, maybe even multiple times. Unfortunately, Tech and BYU now will have to use 3 times, which that will be a lot. But either way, I also just don't look at this Utah team and go, they'll never lose a game the rest of the year. So to me, Utah is not mathematically out of the Big 12 title equation, but if you had to ask me today, I don't see Utah and Arlington right now.
Well, the nice thing is that Texas Tech ended up losing to Arizona State. So you have that. They do have 1 loss there. So BYU and Cincinnati, the only 2 undefeateds. So there is a pathway. I think there is a pathway.
There's a chance.
There's a chance, but you are no longer in control of your own destiny. And that's where the big part of that is. You've got to win out, essentially, and then hope that some chaos happens around the Big 12. And then maybe some tiebreakers come into account. And I don't even know if you're going to win the tiebreakers, because who knows what the tiebreakers are in the Big 12. There's like 50 of them. So you have to go through the list and try and do all the math and everything. I mean, here's the fun part about being in the Big 12, though. Last year, there were 9 different teams coming into that final weekend of college football that all had a chance to get into the Big 12 championship game if things went their way. And we had the championship game that we had last year. So I'm not going to say it's over, but it's not looking great because you don't control your own destiny.
It's not. And it is interesting, like, when we look at a Utah schedule, a BYU schedule, a Tech schedule, like, let's start with Utah, right? Colorado, like, they should absolutely beat the Buffs and not having a great year. That game against Cincinnati at home is going to be a fascinating one, Bryce. I cannot wait for that one. Bearcats looking really good. Still hard to win at Salt Lake. We've seen that Utah home field advantage. It's back for Utah overall. Tech was another beast, and interesting that Tech lost ASU, but, Hammond back a quarterback in there, and Hammond caught Utah by surprise, did not catch ASU by surprise clearly yesterday. Baylor, Kansas State, Kansas. All of those games, Utah very well might be favored going in all of them too. Doesn't mean they're going to win them all. We just saw that yesterday, but they have a high chance to be favored. BYU's schedule gets tough here. You get an Iowa State team that I still like, even if they're not as good maybe as we thought they were. That Tech team's really good. TCU is capable of putting up some points and numbers, and Hoover can make some throws that will still challenge this BYU team, even if TCU has been a little disappointing this year. We already talked about Cincinnati. You have to go on the road there, and I don't see BYU losing to UCF, obviously. But then if we look over to Tech schedule, they're obviously bouncing back against Oklahoma State and then some. The Kansas State game, Kansas State a little better, so that'll be interesting too. But they're definitely winning their last 2 games, the UCF West Virginia game. So at most, they would lose 3 games if they somehow fall to Kansas State BYU. But like we said, Bryce, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of favorable schedules out of here. And I give BYU credit for finding ways to win their last 3 and now leaving themselves room for margin for error. Because right now, if you ask me to predict what BYU will do the rest of the year, I'd probably say 10-2 for the Cougars right now.
Yeah, I think that there's space for them to lose 1 or 2, most likely on the road at Texas Tech, I'm going to say. Boy, it's a tough schedule down the stretch for them. That's for sure. That TCU game, they very well could lose 3 or 4 of the next.
They could,
just because of what we've been talking about. They struggled against the Colorado team on the road, bounced back in a good fashion. Arizona's not fantastic. Went into overtime with them. So the way they have been winning these games has been a little suspect, and I would think that they'll stumble at some point If not, it'll be one of the most miraculous runs to a Big 12 championship game we've ever seen. The way that they continue to win, it's impressive. I do think Cincinnati's a team to look out for in terms of the ability for them to continue just to win. I think one of their tougher games is on the road at Utah, and that one is going to be a really interesting matchup for them to see how battle tested they are on the road and if they can continue to pull off wins themselves. The Bearcats look good, and PFF has Sorsby as their number 1 ranked quarterback in the entire nation. So he's been playing some good football.
And Utah runs a ton of man. So it'll be interesting to see how that matchup goes eventually. I don't know. I'm not ready to say which loss I think will happen, Bryce. I predicted Utah 10-2 coming into the year. Based on how the season's played out so far, I feel like it's more likely going to be 9-3. If they're anything below 8-4, it's a massive disappointment for me. 8-4, I'm like, you know what? You lost to some other frisky Big 12 teams because there's a lot of other big. Everyone on that list except for Colorado to me is a borderline top 10 Big 12 team. Like Baylor and Sawyer Robertson, we know they can put up points, and that is going to be a game in Waco too. Coming up there, Kansas State, Kansas got some quarterbacks that can make some stuff happen too. So I'm feeling 9-3 for Utah right now on the year. What are you feeling for them?
Yeah, I'd probably go and lean 9-3, but I also can see another loss coming down the stretch there as well. When things start to snowball, they really start to unravel when you get 18 to 22-year-olds in a room and they start to lose confidence. They start to lose the ability to trust a coaching staff. I'm not saying that's happening, but if those losses continue to pile up, I could see maybe a 4-loss season as well.
Yeah, I could too. And there's a world where this team does go 10-2. Because they should be favored in almost every game left on the schedule. So I'm not ruling out 10-2. Doesn't feel likely, though, based on how everything is played out. But now you get an opportunity for Utah to right the ship against Colorado, and I am expecting a strong bounce-back performance. But we got some time until we get there, Bryce. So if people are looking for something to listen to in the morning, what do they need to tune into?
Yes, I know you all love your Dan Patrick show in the morning over on ESPN 700. But if you want some local sports talk, we talk about the Utes all the time over on ESPN The Fan. It's 103.9, 98.3 ESPN The Fan. We're on every single weekday morning from 7 to 10 a.m. and over on the Bryce and Bianucci podcast.
Thanks for coming on, Bryce. Appreciate you.
No problem, my friend.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Utes. We got Kyle Whittingham's press conference tomorrow, and we got to talk about what is continuing to go on with this abysmal passing offense that the Utah Utes have. All that and more coming up on this week's Locked On Utes.